Cheating fiancé went ballistic cause I showed her affair proofs and ruined her career after she tricked me to take care of AP's baby. Gonna preface this by stating that this happened 3 years ago. This isn't a throwaway account, but fake names will be used. Let's start with the frame of this story. I, 27M, grew up like most guys under the assumption that the one is out there. That if you play your cards right, your soulmate will magically appear, and you'll ride off in the sunset. When I was 19, I met a woman. Let's call her B. I met B through mutual friends while I was in the army. B was cute, quirky, and seemed like an overall good girl. Her friend, let's call her S, thought it would be a great idea to get us together as a couple. Not sure what her reasons were, but I was into her, and she was into me. B was up for a few days visiting S, and I had just gotten back from leave in my home state, so the meetup was inevitable. We all had lunch. Myself, B, S, and S's husband, let's call him J. This meetup was nothing spectacular, but after B had flown home, she messaged me on FB, and we hit it off. After roughly 3 weeks of talking to B, she hit me with a very strange question. If I was pregnant, what would you do? Now, before I get to my answer, let's do the math here. She was in her party years and slept around frequently. I found that out way later in the relationship. She had a boyfriend a month before meeting me. I was adopted, so accepting a kid as my own seemed like a no-brainer. My answer was what seemed like the right thing. I will love the child as if it were my own. Well, turns out she was showing a lot of signs of pregnancy. A week later, she took the test and was positive. I stood by my word. I'll take care of this kid. There was a 3-month gap between this revelation and when she decided to fly out to me. During this gap, she was very flaky, trying to see if she could get who she thought was the dad to commit and help her take care of the kid. He never budged. She chose me instead. Yes, I understand now why staying with her was a bad idea. I was dumb in love, and I believed she was the one and that she'd come around eventually. I married her so that the army would cover the birth and the rest should have been history. But we all know it wasn't. Year 2. 2 years and I noticed something a bit strange. Some guy, we'll call him R, was liking every post she put out and commenting on every photo that had the daughter in it. This seems odd. At this point in our marriage, I had gotten out of the military and was working a job in security. One night while working, my lizard brain connected the dots, and the gut feeling followed. Now I'm not one to act on just suspicion, I need proof. Given that I was working at a nightclub that night, I would get off at 4 in the morning. She'll be asleep. She leaves her laptop on the living room couch downstairs every night before bed. The plan is coming together. I get home, head to the couch, the laptop is there. I open it and take 2 guesses at the password. It's the birth year of our daughter. I go to her Facebook. I look in messages. There it is. 6 months of conversation with a guy named R. Some of the conversation is flirty. Some banter about how useless and less of a man I am. The worst part, though, was the revelation that this guy is who she feels is the biological father, and she is trying to get him involved. I scroll and scroll until I can't stomach it anymore. I grab the laptop, take it upstairs, and set it on her with the screen shining in her face. As she slowly wakes up, I say we're talking about this in the morning and walk back downstairs. She normally wakes up at 7 but doesn't come down until 9. Probably hoping I would be asleep on the couch. She begins by saying it was only friendly talk and not technically cheating. I called bullcrap and told her that if I see this again, I'm gone. Now I said if, but I knew better. It would be when. This is when I set my plan in motion. I dropped out of college to get a job in my field and made sure anything that was opened up under credit was under her name. I began stating that back where I'm from has a better economy and that we'd be better off there. It took 2 years of convincing, but it worked. Nothing was under my name, and we were set to go to my hometown in 6 months. We got there in May, and I sent her home to visit next month. I knew what she would do, and who she would do it with. There was a guy we met through S the day before we left, and I knew immediately that she was interested in him. 3 weeks after going to visit, she started acting strange again, prioritizing other things over me, putting things off, and becoming distant. Now I spent 2 years setting the dominoes up. I just let her knock them over. I made sure I was jobless, had nothing to my name, and was home where I could fall back on family. I pressured her into admitting that she cheated, and the dominoes tumbled. I cut all funds that were being sent to the account, drained the account to file for divorce. I had nothing, so she couldn't take half. I had no job, so what lifestyle did we have that would require giving her alimony? Everything was in her name, so even though I had financial responsibility over some of those bills, the divorce lasted long enough to destroy her credit. I gave her everything and sacrificed much to raise her child, but in the end she lost the most. I am now extremely successful and valued in my career. I'm not interested in marriage, but I have no shortage of women in my life. Life is good. I still have contact with the daughter, and she often flirts with me, trying to get me back. I'm the only dad the kid has known and have no intentions of becoming an ex-dad. Even though getting back with her is emotionally tempting, to be with the kid more, I know better and I have better options. Moral of the story: careful when you duck over a generous person. They can take much more than they give. We have reached the end of the story. Let's listen to some of the comments by our Reddit listeners. Comment 1. You seriously spent 2 years concocting and negotiating this plan, after finding her cheating on you and knowing she would do it again? Come on. And you're super invested in the child regardless of how y'all broke up? You could have divorced 2 years ago, saved yourself wasting 2 years of your life, and the only reason you didn't is because it would ruin this made-up story. OP reply. You guys really missed the part where I said it was to get home so I wouldn't move from one bad situation to another. I needed to be home near my immediate family so this wouldn't blow up and leave me stranded 1,000 miles from the nearest person that could help. But according to your logic, just end it immediately and make sure you duck yourself over. This plan wasn't primarily revenge. It was to ensure I got out safely without shooting myself in the foot. Comment 2. Personally, I think sticking it out with someone you dislike for 2 years just to get revenge on them is sociopathic and narcissistic. But that's just me. I wouldn't let anyone ruin my life for 2 years just to get revenge on them. OP reply. Just to clarify, as all of it couldn't be said in the post because my phone was taking a dump. I stayed with her to convince her to move back to my home near my family. I lived over 1,000 miles away, and immediately acting on the plan would have left me homeless and far from help. This is why home needed to happen. I had a place to fall back on when she pulled her crap. I flew her home so she wasn't stranded in my hometown. Last act of kindness before letting her world burn. Wife flew out to meet her friend, but ended up having one night stand and now cries like a goat 'cause I found out. I met my wife in an online book club about 10 years ago. At that time I did not know anything about her besides the book she was reading. Found out that she was going through chemo/radiation for stage 4 metastatic cancer, so I messaged a couple of guys in the group asking if they were willing to send me small gifts, so I can organize a care package for her. She received the package in the mail and was so happy, thankful, and appreciative. We started to message each other privately, became friends, and eventually it blossomed into a long-distance relationship. I continued to send her letters and small gifts which she would open after every chemo appointment until she finally went into remission. We lived 1,000 miles apart. I flew to visit her, she flew to visit me. After all the back and forth, she eventually moved to my state. We bought a house together in 2015, got engaged the same year, and got married in 2016. On the surface, it was a great marriage. We had one argument in the entire 6 years of marriage. I was making good money, which gave her the opportunity to land her dream job, which she still holds today. We had a great income and no kids. Remove the stressor of money and kids out of marriage, and there is little left to argue about. If we had disagreements, we resolved them within hours, or so we thought. I will expand on this later. In 2020, we sold our house and moved 1,000 miles to live closer to her family. She had a hysterectomy in May 2021 for chronic bleeding, required 2 units of blood prior to surgery because her hemoglobin was critically low. I was fully supportive of her. She took 12 weeks off work to recover. I took 6 weeks off work to care for her. The surgeon cleared her to return to work after 6 weeks, but I was supportive of and encouraged her to take the full 12 weeks off to recover. After I returned to work and a week before she was scheduled to work, she flew out of state to see her female friend and coworker. During that stay, she had sex with another man with whom she was having an emotional affair with for months. I don't know if I was the first person she had sexual experience with post-surgery, or if it was him. He knew that she was married. How I discovered the cheating was completely by accident. Last weekend, she was out of town for a conference. A couple of things, which in retrospect had no direct relation to the affair, occurred that gave me a bad feeling in the gut, and I went through her computer for the first time in our marriage. I saw the explicit texts and photos. I picked her up at the airport, drove her to our house, parked in the driveway, turned to her and said, "Look at me. I know everything. I know that you've been cheating on me. I have seen the photos and text messages. Here is what is going to happen. You are going to go inside and grab your essentials. You can go stay with your parents or friends. The next time you will hear from me will be through my divorce lawyer." She did not deny anything. As she was walking through the house to pick up her belongings, I was walking behind her because it felt like a stranger was walking in my house and going through our belongings. I never raised my voice or my hand at her, just like during our 6 years of marriage, during the entire process. After she left, I turned on the alarm system and stacked chairs against the front door. I was afraid that she'd come back if I fell asleep. It felt like an intruder was breaking into my house. I slept for a total of 50 minutes during that last 24 hours. After she left, my intention was to call a divorce lawyer the next day. I could not get a day off from my work. I texted her to come to the house. The title is in both of our names, so I was not legally allowed to kick her out before I left for work. I wanted to make sure that she was not going to do anything crazy in the house alone. We agreed to talk after I returned from work. We talked for 2 days in a row. There was a lot of crying from both of us. What looked like a great marriage on a surface was marred by the lack of communication for 6 years from both of us. We both avoided conflict and instead chose to bottle in our feelings. We learned more about each other in 2 days than we did over the course of the entire marriage. While she was away on her conference trip, I drove 1.5 hours to help her 90-year-old grandfather get out of bed, provide incontinence care, toilet him, help with breakfast, and give medication. This was the second time in 2 weeks. She texted me how much she loved me, and how she appreciated what I was doing for her grandfather. She claims that she was going to break up with me after returning from the conference. Break up under the guise of falling out of love with me, and not mention the infidelity to avoid hurting me. I honestly don't believe her, and have a strong feeling that she'd have continued to string me along. Every single issue could have been resolved if each one of us put in just a little bit more effort. While we shared some common interests, we could not relate to the interests which were most important to each one of us. On the first day, I blamed her entirely. On the following day, I started to blame myself for not being an attentive husband. After working from home all day, all she wanted to do was talk to me after I came home from work. I just wanted peace and silence after slaving away for 12 hours. She wanted to talk about social and personal issues which were important to her, but I didn't even offer a listening ear because I could not relate to her experience. These are just a couple of examples. There are dozens of others. And I don't claim to have been a perfect husband. I have my faults. But I genuinely tried to make her happy. At least as much and in ways I could. I found her at the lowest point in her life: misuse of previous marriage, cancer, sexual assault, anxiety, depression, seizures, and future alcohol misuse. Excluding the affair, we will be getting divorced at the highest point in her life. She is in cancer remission, abstinent from alcohol for 1.5 years, no seizures for 3+ years, her anxiety/depression are better controlled, and has a great group of friends and family who live close by. And I'm at my lowest point now. I uprooted my life for her after the move, and have no local support. I haven't told my parents because they will be devastated. I'm afraid that the news will send both of them to the hospital because they loved her so much. We are currently living as roommates/friends in our house. We have agreed to make the divorce and transition as smooth as possible for both of us, even if it takes months. She offered for me to keep the house, take the newer car, keep both of our cats, etc. I can see how remorseful she is. Yesterday, we attended a virtual Al-Anon for family meeting, therapy for family members of alcoholics. What resonated with me was that family members should not blame themselves for the behavior of alcoholics. I feel like I'm blaming myself for my wife's infidelity when I'm the actual victim here. I'm here for support from others who've gone through similar experiences. I'll need to learn to trust my future partner when the person whom I had complete trust in blindsided me like this. My first session with Infidelity Survivors Anonymous is this Saturday. Thank you for letting me vent. Edit: I will add this detail for some context and not to excuse or give a legitimate reason for her to cheat. She was my first serious relationship. I had a couple of flings before her, but that did not progress to anything more serious because of a problem I had, ED. And while we had a spicy sex life when we were in LDR, once we started living together the problem returned. At one point early in the relationship we went many months without having sex. She begged me to see a doctor, but I kept putting it off. Entirely my fault. I was younger, less mature, and frankly embarrassed. Eventually, at age 29, I'm 33 now, I got tested and found out I had very low testosterone levels. And I don't know how many years I've lived this way. Probably a decade, because I always felt like I had less energy than my peers. I received AT replacement at that time and felt like a new man. We started having sex again, but admittedly it was never as good as it was in LDR and never lived up to the fantasy we had prior to living together. There were still times when I couldn't stay hard, though they were much less frequent than before. She did say yesterday that while the sex was less frequent, she did enjoy it when we did have it. What I lacked in one area, I made up for in another area, giving her oral which she loved. And vice versa. Recently I started to feel like my T levels were low again. Now more mature, I went to get tested and have a follow-up visit next week for results. Again, this is not to minimize her infidelity. But if I talk about her flaws, it's only fair that I mention my own to paint the complete picture. We have reached the end of the story. Let's listen to some of the comments by our Reddit listeners. Comment 1. You were both in the same non-commutative marriage, but you did not cheat. That's all down to her. I can almost guarantee she would have cheated on you regardless of the state of your marriage. Do not blame yourself for her crappy and cruel choices. OP reply. About a month prior to this, the topic of infidelity came up. I don't remember if she or I brought it up. And I told her that if she cheats on me, the marriage is over. I don't believe in marriage counseling to see if we can work out the problem. And I hold myself to the same standards. But when the actual infidelity happened, I started to blame myself. And I need help from others to understand why my brain is thinking this way. And how to stop blaming myself. I feel like the saying everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth is unfolding right before my eyes. Comment 2. Honestly, it almost sounds like she used you. She used you as her support when she was sick. The emotional and physical support she needed while she was at a low point. As soon as you said she was at a high point and everything was going better, she cheated and had a nice exit affair knowing you would divorce her. This really all sounds premeditated. OP reply. Partially true, in my opinion. The topic of being used actually came up about a month ago, prior to me finding out about the infidelity. That's probably when things slowly started to unravel. We were driving home after picking up the car at a mechanic and she said that she feels like I'm using her for sex, cooking, and doing laundry. I won't sugarcoat it, that hurt me like hell. And I told her that. Here I thought that I was being a pretty decent husband, and to hear that broke my heart. I couldn't believe that my wife felt like I was using her. She soon clarified that she felt used because we didn't share any deep or meaningful conversations. I suggested that we go to a marriage therapist to work on that. Again, this is before the infidelity surfaced. We were scheduled to go on December 23rd. In the end, I was the one who was actually being used.